Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Tomas Eggers. I'm a staff and engineer with the Division of Water Rights. I'd like to thank you all for coming to this workshop. I know there's a lot of questions out there, a lot of concerns, so we'll hopefully get to a lot of what you guys have already submitted to us on Slido. Thank you all who are joining us by webcast. You can, hopefully you've all received the email explaining how to use Slido. We'll go over it. So here we go. First things first, this is a fire and life safety slide. The emergency exits are at the back or on either side. That will take you out to I Street. Also, we have bathrooms that are just out these doors, the back doors here to the left, if you need the facilities. So just to set a baseline here, you all have been doing this for a long time. We've all been doing electronic reporting for the last 3-4 years. You should be comfortable and accustomed to that and know a lot of what we're going to present on already. So we're not going to go into deep detail on the facets of RMS reporting that you guys are already familiar with. It's mostly to get to some frequently asked questions and to give you guys an idea of what's new and coming up. So who are you? Looking out here, I see a lot of small diverters. We have representatives from big agencies like municipalities, water districts, irrigation districts. A lot of consultants and lawyers I know are joining us on the webcast. But let's get an idea of really who is in the audience here. So if you guys want to right now, you can open up your smart devices and use Slido. We have a poll going up right now. Can we get to that, Damon? Uh-huh. So you can get onto Slido by going to slido.com, and there's no accounts to sign up for, no login. You just have to enter an event code SB88, and that will open up this. We can all vote here for who we are, and we'll see who's joining us in the audience. So it looks like a lot of small farmers, ranchers, and a lot of other. All right. Let that go for a second. Okay. Yeah, come on, ranchers. It's a race. It's a race to who can participate the best. Now I'm going to take that one down, and let's see how it breaks down size-wise. So what diversion tier fits your water rights? How much water do you divert or store? A lot of jumping around there. Yeah, here we go. A lot of helpers. Okay. All right, so it looks like we're got a lot of people getting pretty good at using the Slido app. I encourage you during the presentation, as you come up with questions, you'll be able to enter them there or vote for questions that are already there, and hopefully we'll have some of our very knowledgeable staff members come up and answer some of those at the end. There may be an opportunity at the end to submit other verbal questions, but mostly we want you guys to use Slido so that the webcast audience can also participate in that. Yes, and anybody who's arriving late, we also have volunteers at the edges. You can just raise your hand. They have cards, and they will come and deliver them to you so that you can submit written questions if you don't have a smart device. Okay, so it looks like we have a plurality for helpers and people over 1,000. So interesting breakdown. Okay, presentation. So we have a lot of helpers around the room. Water board staff members, would you stand up? Staff members, helpers. These are people who will be roaming the crowd afterwards. You can ask your questions, and they will also be able to give you help at the laptops that we will have set up out at the tables after the presentations. Okay, thank you. So first up will be Victor Vasquez will be presenting, going over the background and history of the regulations briefly, and answering some frequently asked questions and telling you what's new. Victor.
Again, hello all. Again, my name is Victor Vasquez. It's good to see all of you here on a Friday afternoon. I'm one of the unit seniors in the enforcement section. I'm in charge of the Sacramento Valley Enforcement Unit. And as Tomas said, I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of the SB 88 regulations. And you've been aware of these regulations for many years, so hopefully this is just a review, but there might be a few of you who are new to the game, and so this is for you also. So at its core, SB 88 regulations are about obtaining more and better water diversion data. So the challenge we faced a few years ago during the drought was, and we continue to deal with that now, is we didn't have the water diversion data that we had was not very reliable. We had missing or unusable water data. We had data gaps. We had certain water rights that were not required to be report the diversions for those water rights. We had reports where the diverter just reported the face value divided by the number of months in the diversion season and reported that value. So that's not really very usable data because it's not real data. And then we needed accuracy. Again, prior to these regulations, there were no requirements on the accuracy of the data. There were guesstimates. Again, there were face value data. Sometimes there were complex diversion combinations, and so those were kind of difficult to report. And also, the diversions were often measured using inaccurate devices or methods. Also, prior to the regulations, the diversions only had to be reported on a monthly basis. So once a year, you would report your diversions and break it down by month. What we found is it would be very useful to have more time resolution to the diversion data, such as weekly or daily diversions at some times. And then also there was inconsistent reporting. Until we revised our reporting requirements, some water diverters were only required to report every 3 years or every 5 years. So at any given time, we did not have the most recent data for all the water right diversions. And this impacted the way we did business, or that and affected other areas of water management. Most prominently, during the drought, we needed really good data, which we didn't have at the time, so that we could manage water shortages. As you know, the period between 2012 and 2016 was some of the driest historically in California. And with climate change, we're expecting that our dry and drought periods will become worse. So the need for accurate and complete water diversion data is even more important. Complete data set and accurate data set also will help us avoid over-allocation. If we know how much water is actually being diverted, then we can write water right permits that are more realistic, or maybe not issue so many permits. And there are environmental impacts. We have to balance the needs of you, the water users, versus the needs of the environment and public trust resources, such as our salmon fisheries. And there are economic impacts. With good and complete water diversion data, we can maximize beneficial uses of water, which is required by the state constitution. And we can protect your senior water rights. We can enforce permits and licenses like seasons of diversion and diversion amounts more effectively. And we can implement and extend enforcement of the state's water right priority system. So the solution that the state implemented has 4 components. First is all water right types were required to now report annually. Again, before there were triennial and every 5-year reporting for some water rights. Now everyone's required to report every year. Many water diverters are now required to actually measure their diversions, which was not required before for permits and licenses. We implemented, or the solution required monitoring at greater frequency so that we actually know when water is really being taken. And we required data error mitigation by requiring accurate measuring devices and methods, and requiring qualified installers, qualified individuals to install and calibrate and certify devices. So a little bit of history about how these SB 88 requirements came about. So Senate Bill 88 was introduced in the state Senate in January 2015, which is about a year after the governor declared the emergency drought, the drought emergency in January of 2014. The governor signed SB 88 into state law, and it became part of the Water Code in June 2015. The statute authorized the State Water Board to come up with implementing regulations to fill in the details of how we're going to collect more and better data. So the division staff and the State Water Board developed the draft regulations. We held workshops. We tried to listen to all the stakeholders out there before the State Water Board adopted these regulations in January of 2016. And these regulations became part of the California Code of Regulations, Title 23, in March of 2016. So the regulations that are in Title 23 have 4 elements or aspects to them. Again, the regulations required annual reporting by permits and licenses, statements of diversion and use, water registrations, and federal rights. It required measurement of the diversions for diversions greater than 10 acre-feet a year. And it required accuracy and certification of the accuracy of these measurement methods and devices. The regulations were tiered so that smaller diverters did not have as stringent accuracy requirements, and the larger diverters had to have greater accuracy, more frequent monitoring. And the regulations required qualified qualified individuals to install devices or prepare methods, install devices, and prepare reports. What are the benefits of a more complete data set and more accurate water diversion data? We will have more accessible, accurate, and real-time information available. This will facilitate state water board functions, such as the examples provided in this pyramid. I know you can't read it, but it'll help us in our permitting efforts in determining when a stream is fully appropriated, in our enforcement actions. The data will also help other federal and state resource agencies, such as the Bureau of Land Management, the Forest Service, Department of Water Resources, and Department of Fish and Wildlife. It'll help you, the water users, agricultural, municipal, and other water users in planning your water supply and your water use. And it'll provide useful data to researchers, which help us eventually as we understand more about how water is used in the state and how it affects everyone, society, and the environment. So the requirements for measurement were implemented in 3 steps. First, we required that a measurement device be installed by a certain date. The earliest was January 2017, and the last deadline was in January 2018. So you should have all either installed your measurement device already or submitted a request for time extension or filed an alternative compliance plan, which I will discuss more about later. The next step after installation of your device or preparation of your method was you had to tell us about your device or method, you had to register it, and you had to certify the accuracy of the device or method. And then the third step is where we are now, which is we're ready to receive the measurement data. This table is very busy, but it summarizes these deadlines. You can look at it later. Again, all these deadlines have passed. Okay, so who must comply with the SB 88 regulations? Kind of repeating this, but all water right holders are now required to report annually. permits and license holders, statement holders, registrations, federal rights holders. And these include non-consumptive diverters such as flow-through power plants. There are 3 special cases and exceptions, such as, so if you are in the Russian River, you're a diverter in the Russian River watershed, or you're in an adjudicated watershed, or you have a stock pond, please see one of our staff later if you still have questions about this. So while everyone is required to report, not everyone is required to measure, okay? So you're required to measure if your direct diversion or your storage diversion is greater than 10 acre-feet. Or if you have multiple rights, or you divert under multiple rights, and cumulatively you divert greater than 10 acre-feet for use at one place of use or from a single point of diversion. And if you are required to measure, you must install a measurement device or have a measurement method. The basic requirements of the device or method are they should be able to measure the rate of diversion, the rate of collection and storage, rate of withdrawal or release from storage, and the total volume diverted or stored. Devices and preparation of methods have to be by qualified individuals, which I will discuss more later, and they have to be calibrated every 5 years. What is a qualifying measurement device or method? Measurement devices are equipment, such as weirs, flow meters, staff gauges that measure the flow or your diversion. And a measurement method requires some math, but it might require a device and a calculation, such as using your pump's electrical usage to determine how much was pumped, or using a calculation to determine how much, if there's a shared point of diversion, if you have multiple water users, how you divide that water use between the multiple users. And then there are tiered requirements based on the size of your diversion. Okay, so for accuracy, the device or method has to have plus or minus 15% accuracy if your diversion is less than 200 acre-feet as storage or greater than 100 acre-feet annually as a direct diversion. Okay. Devices that measure diversions for greater than 200 acre-feet annually for storage or greater than 100 acre-feet annually for direct diversion have to have plus or minus 15% accuracy. If it was installed before January 1st, 2016, if it was installed after January 2016, it has to have plus or minus 10% accuracy. And it has to have, the accuracy has to have lab certification. These are for these larger diversions. Okay, for monitoring frequency meaning your measuring device or your measurement method has to record the data at a certain time frequency, and that could be as infrequent as monthly or as frequently as hourly. So for storage diversions greater than 10 acre-feet but less than 50 acre-feet, it's monthly. It is weekly for direct diversions greater than 10 acre-feet but less than 100 acre-feet a year. And for storage diversions 50 acre-feet a year or greater but less than 200 acre-feet a year. And then daily and hourly requirements, frequency requirements apply to the largest diverters, 1,000 acre-feet or more require hourly. And then the next requirement is for telemetry, which will be required starting in 2020. It's required of the largest diverters. It is required for diversion, direct diversion or storage over 10,000 acre-feet. And telemetry is the remote data recording and transmittal of that data. Telemetry would also be required for diversion rates of 30 CFS or cubic feet per second during the months of June, between the months of June and September. And if the diversion will take greater than 20% of a stream flow in certain streams. Next, I want to discuss what a qualified individual is. Again, a qualified individual is required to install a measurement device or prepare a measurement method or certify the accuracy of the device or method and to do the reporting. So for diversions of 100 acre-feet a year or more, or greater than 100 acre-feet a year, a qualified individual is a California registered professional engineer or a person under the supervision of a professional engineer. It can also be a licensed contractor for well drilling or for machinery and pumps. And it could be somebody who received training that's pursuant to Assembly Bill 589. 589 was introduced after SB 88 and allows individuals to be trained to become qualified individuals. So for less than 100 acre-feet a year diversions, a qualified individual is a person who is trained and experienced in water measurement and reporting. And it can be you, the water users, ranchers, farmers, can be qualified individuals. Or it could be your employees, contractors, or other people you hire to do the work on your facility. Again, this is a summary table that summarizes all the accuracy, monitoring frequency, and qualified individual requirements according to the different tiers. It's very busy. You can look at this again later, but it's part of the PowerPoint presentation that we'll make available online later. Okay. Lastly, the SB 88 regulations allow for alternative compliance plans. The goal of the reporting and measurement regulations is compliance. And so alternative compliance plans allow for flexibility when necessary and appropriate. These plans are appropriate when compliance with measurement requirements is not feasible, would unreasonably impact public trust resources, would result in waste and unreasonable use of water, and would be unreasonably expensive. These compliance plans must document why the alternative compliance is necessary, and it must include a cost analysis in cases of if you are claiming that it's unreasonably expensive to comply with the regular regulations. Alternative compliance plans do not eliminate the measurement requirements entirely. You must still achieve the closest attainable compliance, including in cases of unreasonably expensive claims. The plans should not result in data gaps, meaning the plans should say that the diversion will be measured whenever there is water diverted or water is used. Some examples where a compliance plan is appropriate or an alternative compliance plan is appropriate are for remote ponds, stock ponds that are snowed in the winter and are actually not used. So the diversion doesn't really affect the water supply or the available water downstream. Or in cases where there is no electricity available. Okay, so that is hopefully a brief overview of the SB 88 requirements. The point that we really wanted to accomplish today is let you know that we are ready to receive the water measurement data that hopefully has already been collected for 2017 and 2018. The due dates for the annual reports are coming up in April for permits and licenses, and in July or the end of June for statements of diversion and use. So the report management system, which you are familiar with, that's the portal that you submit your annual reports on, is ready to receive these data files. You can upload data files on the RMS system now. Files are not to exceed 10 megabytes. The file types, the acceptable file types are Excel files, CSV, TSV, TXT, and DAT files. And they must be the raw data from the measurement devices. So Stephen Hybl behind me will have a presentation on how to submit these data files after my talk here. But I want to emphasize that the SB 8 requirements adds a few requirements to what you have already been reporting in the annual report. So previously, you were required to identify who you were in the reports, your monthly direct diversions, your monthly storage diversions, and your monthly quantity used. The new information is what your measurement device or method is, your accuracy certification, and most importantly, the measurement data collected at the regulation specified frequencies. So before I turn it over to Stephen, I've been asked to, we got some questions already, or we're aware of some frequently asked questions, so I'm going to go over a few of those, and hopefully that'll cover many questions that you have, and it'll open up some time later on for other questions about data submittal or other regulations related questions. Okay, how do I know if these regulations apply to me? I covered that. Annual reporting is required for all permits, licenses, statements, registrations, and federal rights and certificates. Let's see. But the measurement requirements apply to those that diversions that are greater than 10 acre-feet. What do I do if I miss a deadline? The answer is comply as soon as possible. Compliance is the goal of the State Water Board. What qualifications are required to install measurement devices? Again, it depends if your diversion is greater than or less than 100 acre-feet a year. It has to be a professional engineer or somebody who has AB 589 training if the diversion is greater than 100 acre-feet a year. What qualifications are required to collect measurement data? This is the same answer. Professional engineer or AB 589 trained individuals are required if the diversion is 100 acre-feet a year or more. Where can I find someone qualified to help me? On our webpage, on the State Water Board's webpage, the Division of Water Rights part of the website, we have a list of vendors and suppliers. We have a list of professional engineers, consultants, and also you can contact a trade organization that you might be a member of. I know we've had those organizations contact us wanting to help out, help their members. Where can I learn to do it myself? You can be AB 589 trained by attending a UC Cooperative Extension course. It's not a very expensive course, and I think it's a day long, and you can become a qualified individual. And we have a page on our slides here that provide the links, web links for these resources. Okay, who is responsible, Water Master or me? If you are a diverter in an adjudicated watershed with a court or Department of Water Resources appointed Water Master, then the Water Master is responsible if the Water Master includes you, your diversion, in their report. If you're not included, then you need to report by yourself. What do I do if I can't afford to hire help? This is a tough one. We have no funding, but we have a lot of information on our State Water Board measurement regulations page. And there are the industry organizations who can provide you with some assistance. What if I can't afford to install a measurement device? This might require creativity. You can become a qualified individual and prepare a measurement method, or you can submit an alternative compliance plan and we'll evaluate what you put down in these submittals and let you know if we can work with you. Okay, so as a summary of my talk, reporting and measurement regulations are for complete and accurate water diversion data. Better data benefit water users, state and federal agencies, and the public. Reporting is now required from all water rights holders. A measurement device or method is required for all diverters if greater than 10 acre-feet. That's a typo. It says 100 acre-feet. It's required if it's over 10 acre-feet. And accuracy and qualified individuals are required for measurement devices and methods. And measurement data can now be submitted. So thank you. That's the end of my part of this training. And I will, if you have questions, you can continue to submit them on Slido, or you can get one of the index cards, and we'll try to answer questions at the end of all the presentations. Okay. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stephen Hybl, who will give us a presentation on data submittal on the RMS system.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You guys are still awake? You there? Everybody? Anybody need to get up and move for a second, stretch? We're good? You guys just want to get on with it. My name is Steve Hybl. I joined the data management unit here at the Water Board a year ago. So I've spent most of my adult career on the outside. I have, I'll say, the privilege to have worked with and have some family members that are farmers and rice ranchers, so I have a little bit of insight into the daily lives some of you lead, and I think that's been helpful for me to adapt to some of the questions we receive. I took about 1,000 phone calls last reporting season. When I joined, it was the beginning of reporting season last year, so I would say that I got a baptism by fire. And it was great to understand the concerns and needs of the audience, which are you guys. So Really, more than anything, I want to thank you all for coming today and joining us to learn more about this. I thought that if any of you are familiar with Doonesbury, that the expression on Bill the Cat's face encapsulated the enthusiasm some of you guys feel when the report comes around annually. But nonetheless, I really want to point out the appreciation that we have for your diligence and the time and effort that it does take you to report. I would emphasize that everything counts in large amounts in this case, and if you think about the vast landscape of California and the vast diversity the state encompasses, trying to manage the water there is a titanic and monumental effort. And I do feel empathy for the director at times because he's got a big load to pull here. But in doing that, it all starts with the data that we collect, and it's a grassroots effort, and that starts with you guys. So again, thank you for coming today. Moving into this, the report management system overview is going to be a overview on a higher level. We're assuming that most of you folks have experienced or used it in the past. It is adapting as these changes come on board, so we're going to keep it kind of at a 1,000-foot look into the RMS system and the new changes. However, if any of you are new, we would invite you to stay afterwards for questions and answers, and we're going to make our units contact information available to folks that would like to call in, again, to get help on a one-on-one during reporting season. I'm kind of thinking I may have talked to a few of you on the phone in the past. So that said, what's your why? And that puts us right back into you're all here for different reasons. Some of you are consultants, some of you are agents, some of you represent different municipalities, water agencies. Thank you for coming. We're going to do, again, a general 1,000-foot review, and then we're going to look into the measurement device information that Victor touched on. We're going to look at the types of files that you can upload. He discussed those briefly, and some other things that we would like uploaded, and then the new measurement data upload, and completing the report and making sure that it's submitted successfully. So in looking at the flow of reporting, the Water Board sends out a letter. Many of you are familiar with that letter. It contains your water right IDs and reporting identifiers, which help you log in. And when you're going through the reporting process, you review your water right information, make updates if necessary. You put in your diversion data, your measurement device information now for folks doing more than 10 acre-feet, and then your measurement data upload. The URL for the RMS system is on here. We also have it available in cards, which we'll hand out afterwards. The first page of the RMS system is something I do want to stop and discuss for a moment. We have some changes that are going to be showing up to the system. When I've been on the phone with folks, I've listened to some of their concerns and requests. I've tried to encapsulate those in some changes that will be incorporated. When we do these updates, the system rolls over like quarterly, and the next one is the beginning of February. So the report you will see today will be slightly different than the report you'll see in a few weeks from now. Trying to make the system more user-friendly, some of the language a little bit clearer. We've bullet pointed a lot of the instruction blocks, so I find a lot of folks are skipping over those. So we're just trying to make logical, smart changes that help you. One of the things that is inherent is when folks are logging on, they will put a capital S, for example, if they have a statement and their water right starts with an S, and then they will then put a capital O. In fact, the water right ID is a capital S, and everything else is letters. I'm sorry, numbers. See, I just did it. Doggone it. So the passwords are usually numbers, but sometimes a mix of both letters and numbers. And if they are letters, they are also capitalized. So make sure you're capitalizing your password information when you're entering it in RMS, and that will allow you to log in successfully. The next screen that shows up is a dashboard of your prior submitted reports. In looking at the dashboard, if you look over at the third to back column, it says the report's in progress, but I can see that a report has not been successfully submitted for either 2017 or 2018. So what I want to do is hit the start button to get a report going. And the next page that comes up is going to be an information verification page. A couple things I want to slow down and talk about here. The point of diversion information is outlined. We pull that from a public land survey when the water right is initially established. You're going to have a couple lines of your reporter identity lined out. Right now, if you don't agree with the information that's in here, there is a button in the middle of the screen that says here, and that would pull up a form which you would complete and return to us for a change of address or a change of ownership. Miss Tanya Rogers, who's sitting in the back, please stand up, Tanya. If anybody needs a change of ownership or address form, Tanya has some with her, and we can help you with those after the meeting adjourns. With that in mind, we will make that interface a little, or bring it up to speed and make it a digital change here in the next couple of seasons. But for right now, we're using a paper form. If you mark no in these boxes, it does not update your information for us automatically. So we need your input to facilitate those changes at the moment. Moving forward, the next couple of screens are information on the type of water right you're claiming. In this case, it's a statement and a riparian right. It was established in 1938. The use of water is the next screen, so we're just lightly touching on if this was a recreation facility for the state parks in Mendocino. They likely have some lawn, a visitor center, and they're maintaining a pond for wildlife, boating, and recreation. What I do want to slow down and spend a moment on is the max rate of diversion. The information here is based on a volume times rate of time measurement, and the arrow indicated next to that will pull up your options. When it's clicked on, gallons per minute, gallons per day, or cubic feet per second are the common rates of diversion. The calculation of that is, again, the highest rate times volume for the entire month. So that's what's being entered in the monthly totals. I know people ask questions about, well, if there was a storm, the rate of diversion increased, right? And it did. It would be the highest rate that was achieved during that course of the month, even if it drops right back off after the storm waters subside. The next screen is moving into the data entry fields that we have for the direct diversion information, the diversion to storage, and the total amount of water diverted and used. The top of that area has a calculator that you can then convert your gallons amounts into acre feet. I'll emphasize that the board is only accepting the acre foot calculation for the data entry at this point. We needed to standardize that because we were getting stuff all across the board. So in this case, the second bubble would be selected by the diverter. They were only diverting to storage or collecting water in the pond I mentioned. That brings us down further on the screen to the columns. Now the first column is grayed out and has zeros because they're not directly diverting or using water out of the watershed. They're just collecting to storage. So the calculations are then from, again, gallons to acre feet are computed by the owner, and the totals for each month are entered into the boxes. The third column represents the total water. So again, I'll go back and say if the first column, if they were directly diverting and using water right out of the watershed and collecting to storage, there'd be information in both of those columns. The total of both of those columns would be represented in the third. Because they're just diverting to storage, we only have one. We don't have to do any math there. We're just bringing our total storage amount to the third column. So if you guys have any questions on that, again, we can field answers for you at the back. The last is kind of getting to the meat and potatoes of what you guys came for today. We are looking at the water diversion and measurement screen, this is where we are going to be, this column down here is where if we're uploading our data to register a measurement device, it's going to show, and it's going to be right next to that arrow. You do that by selecting the first box at the bottom. So provide measurement device information and certification. Once you hit continue, once you hit that provide information box, it will bring you to the registration page for the measurement device. And there's several questions that do need to be filled out. Once this form is completed, a unique identifier for the measurement device will be created and stored in the system. So there's quite a few questions initially where you have to put in the model, make, type of measurement device. It's extensive, but the information's stored and will then reappear on your future reports. So it's not something you have to go redo every year. In completing that, again, what type of flow meter, for example, it is, the actual manufacturer, the approximate, there's several things, I'm sorry, the registration number, and then the last time the device was calibrated, and who is calibrating your device. If you look down on M13, there are questions below that that would ask the qualification of the individual that's actually maintaining the calibration on the device. So Victor mentioned that the calibration has to happen every 5 years, but we want to make sure that the equipment is being maintained by a professional, either engineer or somebody that's certified to work on it. Below that, we have a few more questions, and then again, telemetry information is going to be pertinent in a couple more years. We're moving towards that. And finally, at the bottom, what we're asking for in that field are the type of equations, depth capacity curves, or possibly if you had attended a 589 training, your certification for that class be uploaded in that field. Once all of that is complete, the next field will actually show you a unique identifier, like I mentioned in blue down, that has been produced by the system for your measurement device. The next step is simply pressing the Manage Data File button in that same bracket. And the next window appears, simply asks you to upload your data files from either your hard drive or a USB you've collected it on. So plug your USB into your computer, bring the files up. Again, Victor mentioned the type of files we accept, but we need the raw data files, so either XL, SXL, SX, CSV, DAT files, TXV, and TSV files are acceptable. What we can't take here, and I'm going to emphasize this, is PDFs or JPEGs. And why? Because they're not machine readable, so we can't validate the data if we have a picture. Once that happens, in this case, I'm calling the reservoir we're maintaining at the state park the Bullfrog Pond. The Bullfrog file shows up in that box, and as I carry it forward and hit return, it then shows up in the same bracket my measurement device was stored on. We all doing okay so far? You can't see it? I don't. We can show this to you a little more closely. I realize there's some small print, so I apologize. I was hoping it would show up a little bit bigger. Yeah. Moving forward, the last screen in RMS is the additional remarks. I would encourage you guys, if, for example, you had any conditions that prevented you from diverting and you wanted to upload information regarding, I've talked to folks on the phone that were involved in the fires in Napa County, had their point of diversion destroyed, or had mudslides that covered their point of diversion. This would be a great spot to put a picture as evidence and upload information regarding, so our team can recognize that. The last one is the validation screen for the sign-off for whoever filled out the report. Again, as a water diverter, I'll let you know that you can have somebody help you with the report. So if you're passing a ranch, for example, to one of your siblings, they can do the report for you. And they would sign here and certify that they did it honestly. The last point here, and I want to emphasize this, is hitting the submit button on the bottom of the final screen. If you don't hit submit, we don't capture your data, so you have to make sure you hit it. How do I validate that I hit submit and it was captured? The next field will take you back to the dashboard where you started. In that top box, there are two buttons, View and Amend. If you wanted to go back later and add a file, for example, or some supporting data, you would hit the Amend button and have the opportunity to add files and navigate through the report again. The View button, if it's selected, will then take you to a report summary where your data is shown in a final summarized report. That said, you then can rest easy. You have complied and reported successfully. And again, I'm going to say that we greatly appreciate your diligence and attention. And the data management unit that stood up earlier is here to help you guys. So if you have questions along the way, please give us a call, and we'll get back to you in a timely manner. Thank you very much, guys. And I'll be available after for questions if you have them.
Thanks, Stephen. Next, we have Michael George to come up and speak to you guys about the Delta Measurement Experimentation Consortium. Some things that, who they are and what they've learned. So, thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay. Anybody want to stretch now? So just show of hands, how many of you divert water out of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta? Okay, so it's a few. Most of you are in other areas around the state. So what I'm going to be talking about is specific to the Delta. Some of what I'll mention may have application elsewhere. But my name is Michael George. I'm the Delta Water Master, and probably one of the first things you might want to know is, what the hell is a Delta Water Master? So this is just quickly about what my job is and how it came to be. This role of Delta Water Master was created in the 2009 Delta Reform Act. I'm an independent officer of the state, so I'm not a civil servant, et cetera. I'm appointed to a 4-year term by the State Water Board with the agreement of the Delta Stewardship Council, and I report jointly to those two entities. The State Water Board obviously is the entity that we're housed in right here. The Delta Stewardship Council, like my role, was created in the Delta Reform Act of 2009. The responsibilities are specific to administering water rights within the Delta. And the reason for that, which I'll get into in a moment, is because the challenges in the Delta are significantly different than the challenges that many of you face in other parts of the state. In addition, managing the water rights in the Delta are critical to the co-equal goals identified by the legislature in that 2009 Delta Reform legislation, specifically to improve the ecological function of the Delta and to improve the reliability of water resources. But in addition to that, we're involved with trying to coordinate the implementation activities of lots of different agencies. There are lots of different entities involved in the Delta for ecological purposes. You've got the State Water Project, you've got the Central Valley Project, you've got lots of individual diversions, and as a result of all of that coordination, I've also got a role in advising on policies and practices in the Delta. So you probably all recognize that the Delta is a complicated place. It's varied over its extent. It's about 750,000 acres, about the size of the state of Rhode Island, and it's different in different places, the north, the south, central, east, west. There are a lot of differences. Most of it was reclaimed from swamps. That's one of the things I try and keep in mind as we try and intelligently manage governmental activities, regulation, et cetera, in the Delta. A lot of the problems that we face are actually a result of governmental actions that were taken in the past. So back in the 1850s, reclamation of the swamps was a priority for the state and federal government to get rid of the swamps and turn it into productive agricultural land. That obviously created a lot of the problems that we're dealing with today. The fact that the Delta is leveed, channelized, and the water courses that used to meander all throughout the swamps have been channelized, which creates a lot of the problems that we're trying to deal with today and understand better so that we can correct some of the unintended consequences of former governmental actions and private actions that were taken in furtherance of those former government policies. Obviously, with respect to all of that, the water rights history and practices in the Delta evolved over a long period of time, a long time ago. So, for instance, as you know, prior to 1914, there was no specific administrative mechanism, such as the State Board and its predecessor, which created, the State Water Commission was created only in 1914. So the Delta was changed dramatically from its natural state as a swamp and estuary into a channelized, leveed area in the period from about 1850 till well before 1914. So most of the water rights in the Delta are not subject to the administrative jurisdiction of the State Water Resource Control Board, and that complicates things. In addition, some of the farmland, much of the farmland, particularly in the central and western part of the Delta, is actually below the surrounding water level. So that creates both some opportunities and some problems associated with managing that landmass, because as you were going in to drain the swamp and turn it into farmland, the dominant concern that you had was for drainage, not pumping water for irrigation purposes. You were trying to get water off, maintain a dry farm bed, and then bring limited amounts of water on to water your crops. So drainage was the dominant consideration. In addition, the Delta is defined, the legal Delta is defined as the area where there is tidal influence. So unlike a lot of the upland farming areas, the Delta is determined by its impact with and its correlation with the tidal influences from the Pacific Ocean, San Francisco Bay. And of course, one of the aspects of that is salt intrusion. And it was because of the concern with salt intrusion into the Delta and the difficulties associated with managing the water system that the state and federal projects were created to capture water when it was available in the wintertime, store it, and release it later so as to keep the Delta sweet, to push salt water out, to maintain a balance that would allow fresh water to move through the Delta and ultimately to be used in parts of the state that were in deficit. It's also important to recognize that in the Delta there are no storage facilities. The Delta really acts essentially like a sponge. So you drain water out of the swamp, you try and bring water on to irrigate your crops, keep the water table at a reasonable level so that you can grow those crops, but there is no storage of water in the Delta. In addition, because of the fragility of the Delta and because of the problems associated with managing a Delta that was a former swamp, there are very significant development constraints. We have in the Delta, as you know, a number of historic towns that were built along the rivers and so forth, places like Clarksburg and Iselton and so on. But there is not much development in the Delta, and much of the Delta, the primary zone of the Delta, is limited by legislation as well as the practicalities from being developed for any purpose essentially other than farming. And I think it's important that we all understand, we as bureaucrats and regulators, and like Steve and I spent most of my career outside, I'm still learning the ropes of becoming a good bureaucrat. But we do have to recognize that these development constraints are designed to keep the Delta functioning, but recognize that managing the landmass in the Delta depends on sustainable, profitable farming within the Delta. So the regulations that my colleagues have talked about ran into some unforeseen challenges when applied in the Delta. And one of the ways I became aware of this was what I'm calling here the Watermaster's field trip. Staten Island, which is one of the islands in the Delta, is now owned and managed by the Nature Conservancy. And the Nature Conservancy was one of the proponents of the measurement regulations. So in October of 2016, the Nature Conservancy asked me to come out and look at how they were doing on Staten Island. And this is a picture of Staten Island, and this is a specific siphon on Staten Island. And the reason I brought the picture out is because it does help to illustrate some of the unique issues that you run into in the Delta. First of all, the fact that you can use a siphon, that is, you can use gravity to take water out of the higher water table and put it on your crops without the need of a pump, with the ability to simply start the flow and then let gravity bring the water on. Again, kind of a unique opportunity provided by the fact that you've got a water table higher than your water use. But one of the things that the Nature Conservancy pointed out was that at the time out there, they wanted to be early adopters. They wanted to show how this was done. And they said, well, we've been here now and we've spent about $40,000 and we haven't come close to getting plus or minus 10% accuracy because we've run into a few problems. That was not exactly news to me because I was also responsible for enforcing the Woods Irrigation Company settlement, a settlement of a case that had the Water Board had brought against the Woods Irrigation Company, which is an irrigation company on Roberts Island in the southern part of the Delta. And in part of that settlement, the Woods Irrigation Company had agreed to measure its diversions as well as measure its return flow to the Delta. And I'd also been out there and recognizing, despite best efforts and significant expenditures of money, they were having some problems coming into compliance with the settlement that they had agreed to. And so, as I like to say, we don't ever have any failures in the Delta, we just have disguised learning opportunities. And so one of the things that we tried to do was to begin to categorize and catalog what infrastructure was there, how they worked, and what we could do to gain better understanding of how much water was being diverted at what times through those facilities. And again, not just siphons, but you've got tidal gates, so you've got these large structures, and when the tide comes in, the flap gate opens up and the water gets trapped behind that flat gate, and when the tide goes out, the flap gate closes and holds that water there where it is then diverted and used for irrigation purposes. So you got tidal gates, you got also situations out there where you've got a number of farmers working together on a single diversion structure and then a long ditch where they all share water. And it was very difficult for them to figure out how to allocate the water among those folks along the ditch. So this is just one example of the situation that we got into here. And let me just point out, I think there's a pointer here someplace. Okay, never mind. There probably is. I just technologically challenged myself. But you see there on the water side, you've got a solar panel to bring power. One of the questions that gets asked is, what do you do when you don't have power there? The solution to that in the Delta has been primarily these solar panels. Now, of course, that's an open waterway, and solar panels are somewhat attractive, not only for theft and repurposing for another user, but they make dandy target practice for the kids, and they're just fun to destroy, apparently. So we've had some problems with that. Also, there is right near where you see those on the water side, there's a gizmo that's around that old pipe, that old diversion structure, and that's the meter itself. We experimented with a number of meters. I don't say we, I say the people who are trying to comply with the regulation. And some of those meters have probes that go into the pipe. Those probes got fouled with seaweed and other kinds of stuff. Became very difficult. You also see on the land side over there a gizmo that is meant to telemeter the data so that it can be collected and then reported. And you'd be surprised to know that in the Delta, the cellular phone doesn't always work properly. So collecting and maintaining data was a challenge. So that's just an idea of an example of why things are different and complicated in the Delta. So what did we do? We said, look, before everybody spends a ton of money on stuff that may not work, let's instead get together a bunch of people who are working on this, and let's do some experiments. Let's find out what works. Let's eliminate what doesn't work. And so we brought together a group of stakeholders to try and determine what kind of meters work, what kind of problems do you have. This is, where you decide, look, it doesn't make sense to put into use in the Delta a measurement device that has a probe that sticks into your pipe because it will get fouled in a very short period of time. So that kind of experimentation took place. We tried to look at what kind of devices are compatible, what meters work with what telemetry. And we tried, as we found these unforeseen challenges, to look for potential solutions and to make that information broadly available to the Delta community so that we could make greater progress toward getting to the objective of SB 88, which is to get better real-time information about water use in the Delta so that we can manage things better, particularly in times of shortage. So these are the participants, the major ones in the consortium, a number of state agencies, a number of consultants, engineers, et cetera, and some NGOs. So we've got a lot of people at the table, all of whom want to make this work and who are trying to sort through the kinds of unforeseen circumstances that we've encountered. That means that a lot of people in the Delta are not in strict compliance with SB 88, even though, as you heard earlier, all the deadlines have passed. Everybody's supposed to be in compliance. And yet, within the regulation itself, there is a provision for extensions of time. And what we have done is tried to organize the Delta. That's a hard thing to say, organizing the Delta, because one of the problems in the Delta is there is no Delta-wide institutional organizing factor. And so with the consortium, doing these experiments, we wanted to make sure that everybody in the Delta was either in compliance, in experimentation, and moving toward compliance. So how did we do that? We said, look, if you would like an extension of time to comply with the regulation, you have to find a sponsor who will be part of this experimentation process. You have to opt into that experimentation process, and what that meant was, number one, you had to sign that you understood that in addition to the reporting requirement for your water right, you also understood that there was a measurement requirement. And you understood that you were privileged to have an extension of time to comply in order to allow this experimentation process to work out, and that you would report through your sponsor progress toward the objective of compliance. And we allowed those extension of time on 1-year increments, so that we required people to indicate that they understood they had the obligation, they would follow the experimentation process, they would ultimately use the experiments to inform their compliance, and they would report progress on a regular basis as we move toward compliance. In the course of this, and this is kind of the last thing I'm gonna touch on, an alternative hypothesis has been proposed, and it is just that, it's a hypothesis. But our office sponsored a study of how to get accurate, timely information about the use of water in the Delta. Again, there's no storage in the Delta. If you oversupply water to your plants, you're going to have to drain it off, and when you drain it off, the water will return to the natural system in proximity to where it was taken. Proximity both in terms of time and location. So we didn't have a situation where anybody was taking more water than they would need, except accidentally or because they weren't sufficiently informed, or because they just took a little bit more. If they took a little bit more, it would come back fairly quickly. And so what we were trying to figure out is, how could we use the new technology of satellite imaging to determine how much water was actually being used in the Delta? And so we had this 2-year study performed with a number of academic institutions, State University at San Luis Obispo, UC Davis, National Aeronautic and Space Administration, CSU Monterey Bay, a number of academic institutions, and a number of state and federal agencies, including the Department of Water Resources and the Bureau of Reclamation. And we identified 7 different methods for estimating accurately the evapotranspiration of crops within the Delta, because everybody understood the Delta was a difficult place. These channels create winds which desiccate crops and make differences in terms of water use over time. But in the course of that 2-year study, examining 7 different methods, we came up with conclusions that we could pretty accurately determine the actual ET of crops, even in the complicated circumstances of the Delta. That's a peer-reviewed study. We got it published, and partly as a result of the support of the State Board and the Department of Water Resources, that academic study has been picked up and turned into an ongoing program to take that research and make it useful and available to individual farmers, regulators, water users, et cetera. And in a process called OpenET, this consortium is now developing an app that within a couple of years you'll be able to take and look on your smartphone, and it will give you an accurate estimate of actual crop water use on your property. As a regulatory matter, what we're going to do is take that and say, look, this is a rebuttable presumption. We think this is the actual water use of your crop down to field level, 30 meters by 30 meters, and say, if you're willing to accept that as your water use, we're willing to accept it as our water use, and we'll use it as the best estimate of actual water use in the Delta. The idea is that this information will be more consistent, it'll be available in real time, much less expensive and less intrusive, and therefore more useful than trying to measure 1,500 to 2,000 diversions within the Delta. Now, if this hypothesis is borne out, and I want to emphasize that it's a hypothesis, if it's borne out through this experimentation process, then migrating to an alternative way of determining actual crop use in the Delta would require an amendment to the legislation. So we'd have to capture the data, make the case, take it to the legislature, and request a change in the legislation for purposes of better managing water in the Delta and achieving those co-equal goals. So our next step is go out and get the data, and that's where we are now. That's what the Delta Measurement Experimentation Program is moving toward. So that's all I've got to say. Questions come later, but I'll stick around, happy to have those questions when it's time. And I'm not sure who's up next, but I'm done.
All right, thank you. That was great. So we, our next sort of couple slides here where you can find additional information. We're going to get to the question and answer session. We've been looking through the Slido questions, and a lot of them we've been able to sort of answer by text. So if you go back and look in your Slido, and you'll find that you know, maybe some of your questions have already been answered in written form. So where can I find this information again? So the first place is for general information, the Division of Water Rights website. We've been making a lot of changes, trying to make things more accessible. We know it's a work in progress, but for most general information, you can go there, use the search function if you have something very specific. If you're ready to sort of let our links guide you around and see what you find, then you can just start at the home page and see where it goes. A recording of this workshop and other helpful videos that we have made to help people go through the RMS site are available at the link below. Including this presentation and these slides will also be available, so these will be collected all in one place. So that's waterboards.ca.gov/videos/rms.html. It's pretty tough to see, so I understand. We will make those available, and we can also email this slide afterwards to everybody, so they'll have some of these links collected in one place. So just check your emails. Those of you who RSVP'd already gave us emails. Let's see, water measurement and reporting information is available at another site. A lot of questions we get are about who can help me do this. So we have device vendors and suppliers lists of those people with their contact information on the site. That's available at this link here. The UC Cooperative Extension offers AB 589 training. That's training that you can get to be a qualified individual for yourself. You're not qualified to help other people with their diversions. They're the ones who are familiar with their ranches and whatnot. So it's mainly so that you can't go around selling your 589 services, but you can learn how to do it for yourself for certain size rights that need that. And then water rights and reporting consultants. We have a list of people, professional engineers, contractors, people who are qualified to help you with set up measurement methods, install devices, and whatnot. That's also available. So thank you. These are context information for the specifically for measurement and SB 88 type questions. So questions about the regulation, about measurement, about your devices, where to put in the different certifications, what devices need certifications. Those types of questions can go to this email. So like I said, I know this is very difficult to read, but I will be emailing these particular slides out to everybody so that you'll have a place to look at them more closely and go to the links attached there. This is a slide for the contact of our data management unit who helps people with their reporting. When you call in, they're generally the people that help you with the computer part of this. A lot of these people will be available afterwards. We've set up some laptops out at the tables that you might have seen coming in at the lobby. There's tables set up if you've brought your own laptops. If you've brought your reporting identifier and password, your data, we can actually help you put that in right now. So if you've come for that purpose, there will be staff waiting outside to answer questions and help you with the computer part afterwards. This is Michael George's contact information, the Delta Water Master, and his great presentation. If you're interested in the work that they're doing, I suggest that you contact him, very capable staff. If you have any questions, now would be the time. So we've collected about 102 questions already on Slido, and many, many more people have voted on these questions. So I will ask Victor to come up and help answer some of these questions. Kyle and Julie as well, if you'd like to be our expert references. So a lot of you have already know how to use Slido. Here's some tips. This is what you see at home if you're using a laptop or a computer. That's the screen you see. If you're using a cell phone, it looks more like this. Okay. If we would put up Slido for me. Okay. So I guess we'll just take it from the top. Let's do 4, and then we'll let you get out there and start entering data and asking people questions in person, okay? So here's the first one. Let's go. Why are we having users under 100 acre-feet go through all this red tape? How is this going to conserve water in California? So the purpose of gathering all this information is manyfold. We are charged with protecting and extending the priority system, so protecting the rights of senior users and junior users, making sure that the water is used as efficiently as possible to the maximum possible benefit of the people of California. So, if a large senior water rights holder is not using all the water, we need to know so that we can make that water, we can know that so that when a junior water rights holder takes the water, we know that they're not infringing on a senior water right. And hopefully the junior water right holder will also know that and become more efficient when they decide to use the water. So the more granular the data, and the better we can model it, and the better we can know where all the water is, the more we can increase the efficiency of the system and the productivity for all of us. So that is why we want more granular data. Now, all of that has to be balanced against the usage of the water by everybody. So that's where public trust comes in, and we need to know how much water is required for endangered species, for example, and how much is not required. So if there is so much water available that we didn't know about, maybe we can loosen some restrictions that we currently have. So that's why even on a small watershed where you only have 100 acre-foot diverters, they might currently be affected by restrictions that they wouldn't be if we had more information. That's a possibility. I don't have any specific case examples of that, but that is an example of why granular information and this more frequent monitoring data would be useful. You want to do it?
Okay, let me take the second one. What are acceptable ways to comply with measurement requirements when no power, internet, and vandals at diversion and power internet will never be available? This is a situation where an alternative compliance plan might be appropriate to be submitted. You would first explain the situation. There are options for power. As Michael George pointed out, you could have solar panels. You can have battery packs. We are aware that you can measure head differentials without requiring power. So that's one part of that question. The lack of internet access isn't necessarily a game stopper, because that could, the data could be recorded and then retrieved at a later time. I would say internet access or cell access would be required only for those very large diverters who are required to do telemetry by 2020. The vandal situation is something that's faced by a lot of facilities all the time. I don't know if there's really a good answer for preventing vandalism.
Yeah, it's more of a case-by-case scenario there. I would also mention that, the idea is always to have a measurement device. That's the best information we can get to directly measure these diversions. That's what's most useful to us and to you, and will produce the most efficient system thereafter. There are some situations that are, close to impossible to get strict compliance with these regulations, and in those cases, we have things like measurement method, where you have a device plus math to make it doable, or in extreme situations, alternative compliance plans, and those would be evaluated for reasonableness. So a lot of people ask, well, what's reasonable and who judges that? And it basically, it's a subjective term. It adds a subjective element into it that would, you try to avoid. So that's why the main goal is to follow, the strict regulations. Go with a device, submit the raw data from that device, and so that's the goal. But in cases where that's impossible, there are other alternatives. The next question we have is, why don't you email a reminder to water rights users in January? Sounds like a good idea. Take that into consideration. Moving on. What inexpensive devices, no power nearby, can be used to measure flow, volume through a ditch diversion system?
Tomas.
Yes. Oh, you covered it?
About emailing, we could consider. Is there a LIRIS list already that we could probably do?
There is. One of the things that we really need people to do is to keep their information up to date. That would really help us. And you can sign up for a list that a Lyris list is an email service that we have. I'll let Kyle answer that.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us for the afternoon here. While I'm answering questions, I'm just going to ask if there's any other staff that are in the room, if they could deploy out to the back area so that as we finish up here, you're ready for some of those questions. So the email idea, fantastic. Absolutely love it. I would love to send out email reminders to everybody. The problem is that we only have like 3,000 or 4,000 emails for 40,000 water rights. So if you have an email address and you'd like to be communicate, or if you'd like, that's your preferred method of communication, when you fill out your annual report, please include that information so that we can start working with you and communicating in that format. Additionally, we have the SB88 Lyris list when we blast out reminders that way and let people know that upcoming deadlines and new information as it becomes available to us. So please submit that if that's something that you're interested in. And then let's see. So the last one that I saw, and this is a written card, so I want to make sure that we respect the people that came in here and provided us the index cards. I don't have it in front of me. It was reporting deadlines. And so if you are an appropriative water right, you have a permit or a license, some piece of paper that we said thou shalt. Those reporting deadlines are April 1st of each year, and that's for water use of the previous year. So for 2018, if you have a permit or a license, we would like to start getting your data now. 12 intrepid water rights reporters have already submitted that, so if you're online or in the room, thank you very much. But if you haven't, we have until April 1st to receive those data. And if you have a statement, so if you're a riparian diverter, you would have until July 1st of this year to give us your 2018 data. And just as a benchmark, when we're asking for data, sometimes we aren't always the best of letting you know how much data we've gotten or what the who's been submitting what. I'm very proud to report that we get about 80 to 90% of water rights users reporting their data every year. So we really appreciate that, and that goes on a long way in that little triangle that we showed about how data is used in transparency and how we use that for protection. So I know that everybody's been sitting down for about 90 minutes. Once again, I really appreciate your time. We have staff pre-positioned out there in the back. It's easier to tell that they are the staff because they don't have a visitor's badge. I will be available for a short time as well as a few other managers. I want to have a huge thank you for our team here, our presenters, our people behind the scenes. Thank you very much for making this happen. And looking forward to meeting all of you out there in the lobby and the second floor. Thanks.
I'm a very small.